Welcome to the Balancing Act podcast. I'm Andy Temte, and today we've got a very special guest. Well, all of our guests are very special, but this is a really important one to me. We've got Paul Smith, Chief Executive Officer at Warland Court Limited, and the former Chief Executive Officer of the CFA Institute joining us. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Thank you, Andy. It's great to be here.
Yes, thank you. Just for our listeners, I hold the CFA designation. Paul also holds the CFA designation. So our conversation today is going to be a continuation of our series on the Reskilling Revolution, and really this kind of skills versus degrees as signals of workplace competency issue. And the central point of today's conversation is that fact that Paul and I both hold the CFA credential, and can I have really a portfolio of industry recognized credentials? Is that just as good of or even better than a degree in the future world of work? So that's the spoiler alert, if you will, for today. But Paul, before we get started with all our guests, we really want you to tell our listeners your story.
Well, thank you, Andy. As you know, one of the problems with being my age is your story tends to go on for far too long. I always struggle to condense it, but I'm English, as you can probably hear, born in London, 62 years ago now. I think conventional upbringing, university, studied history at university, which I think surprises a lot of young people nowadays.
You and I are aligned in that.
Well,
I started out in history as well.
Right.
So thank you.
So, but obviously left university, had no idea what to do with a history degree. So I became a UK accountant first, worked for Pricewaterhouse for 4 years, and then moved from there to my first overseas posting. I joined an asset management business in Paris, in France, that I worked for as a fund manager for 4 years. All sorts of things happened. I actually was lucky enough to become the managing director of that in around 1988, moved the business back to London, run that very happily for 7 years. And that was a sort of a private wealth management business, but very much in the alternative investment world. So accountancy to fund management. I left there in 95, went out to Asia in 96, and went into banking as a service provider to asset managers, as a custodian, fund administrator, loan officer, really, to investment funds, and did that very happily for 11 years, ran that business through until 2004 globally, when we sold it to HSBC. Part of the lock-in, I was very lucky to have a couple of years in the US working for HSBC. Took my money off the table when my handcuffs came off, went back to Hong Kong, set up my own fund management business then, which I ran for semi-successfully for about 6 years, and eventually sold that to some Chinese interests, and then joined CFA Institute in 2012. And as you said in your introduction, ended up running that from 2015 to the end of 2019. Since then, I inhabit this sort of the world of what's called, I believe, portfolio world, where I do a whole variety of things. I have non-executive directorships. I work pro bono for a few foundations and for some government agencies. And I also look after a number of private equity interests that I've accumulated over the years. So I divide my time between those three activities. I still live in Hong Kong, although at the moment I'm talking to you from England. Because of COVID, really. I'm a COVID employee from Hong Kong, like so many people are at the moment. But looking forward to going back home. Hopefully the news is slightly more encouraging there. And I'm looking forward to going back and picking up the threads of my life when this pandemic is finally declared over.
Yeah. So I want to go back to this transition from history major to accountant. There are a lot of people that they walk into the liberal arts, and the liberal arts has somehow become a bad word.
Yep.
I really don't think that it is. It has a branding issue, of course, but if you could just dial in just for a moment on how you got the how between history major to accountant. Was there an apprenticeship program that you went through to get there?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. And yes, exactly that. You in the UK at the time, and in most other countries, there is an apprenticeship program. You go in and do effectively 3 years indentured servitude to an accountancy firm. It's not that bad, in fact, but you do 3 years. And during that 3-year period, you also sit exams every year. And so the combination of having the practical skill of actually working a job for 3 years, plus the academic skill of passing the various accountancy stages as you go through that route, means that after 3 years, you emerge the other end as a fully qualified accountant. That's the route. Every country has slightly different rules, but more or less that's the way it goes.
Except for the United States.
I mean, the real answer to your question, it was an excellent way of migrating from the liberal arts into the business world, because it was very similar to being at university. In fact, you joined with a cohort. There was training. It was a big company. PricewaterhouseCoopers is the company that I joined. So they put an awful lot into you as a young person, 21-year-old person. They gave you 3 years of really, really good training. You saw a whole bunch of businesses. So you weren't just confined to financial services, which is where I ended up. I did dipping of oil tanks. I did supermarkets. I did all sorts of publishing companies, all sorts of different things. And exposure to different facets of businesses as well. So it was a fabulous business training, really. Plus, you had a cohort of people your age who you knocked around with, and it really was a very easy way of joining the workforce and finding your feet. What does anyone know at 21? Really, I certainly knew absolutely nothing. So I was very grateful for that introduction to the world of work.
Yeah. So 2 things from that. Number one, what year was that again?
That was 1984. Oh, sorry,
okay.
1980. 1980, I joined.
Okay. So for our listeners, our listeners are around the world, but many of them are here in the United States. And the story that you just told is not a familiar story here in the United States. Apprenticeship programs are, as you would know from your time at CFA Institute, they are not the norm here as they are in other countries. And so I just want our listeners to hear that story. And that was back in 1980 that Paul went through that journey. Yep. And in this series, we're talking a lot about these alternative pathways into the world of work, and especially working to learn in lieu of learning to work, which is the normal model in the United States. You go to college for 4 or 5 or 6 years, and then ta-da, job market, here I am. Yep. And there's those well-defined paths into the workplace, especially the professional, the business professional workplace. We've got a lot of work to do. And I just want our listeners to be thinking that this was happening back in 1980. So this is a well-worn path. Folks know how to do it, and why we're not doing more of it in the United States is kind of a head scratcher.
It wasn't even just you as a student that knew it. Obviously, the other element to it, Andy, is that the companies would go and find you on campus, basically. So there was what we called in the UK a milk round, basically, where companies came to campus to show you what they did, and then obviously to take CVs and to screen you and to give you interviews. So it was very much a sort of an old school Tinder dating activity, really, in terms of the way that it operated, and it was I think successful. Like all of these things, it sort of kind of, and I know you have this problem in the States. The challenge with it is that companies tend to go back to the same universities.
Yep.
So actually, to a certain extent, the die was cast depending on the school that you went to, the university that you went to, because then different companies would go and show themselves to you at that university. The UK has just the problem that you do in the US, that people who go to community colleges and other types of institution are not seen by these companies. So an awful lot of talent goes wasted because of the sort of the rather narrow focus that a lot of businesses have on recruiting from the same pools every time.
Yeah. So let's we'll pause that part of the conversation just briefly. I'd like to. What I didn't hear from your story was kind of that one accelerant in your career, that one thing that just kind of gave you rocket boosters, because you went from university into the accountancy training program, and then all of a sudden by the late 80s, early 90s, you're leading and you're doing some really, really strong work. What was that one, if you can put your finger on it?
I think I can. I mean, really, it was, and it's very germane to today's world. It was a crisis. The old Rahm Emanuel joke is the right one. Never waste a crisis, basically. And what happened in my life was October 1987. Very difficult for people to remember. I mean, these things go in cycles. October 87 was a huge stock market crash. Started in Wall Street and reverberated around the world. And that crash basically shook the asset management business up that I was working in at the time. Showed that a lot of the things that we were doing were not fit for purpose. I was fortunate enough to be working at the time with my boss on a variety of initiatives in the sort of the fund of fund world, the outsourcing a lot of what we did to third-party managers, particularly alternative investment managers. And it was through that work that I was able to convince the shareholders of the business that was really the direction that we should take the company in. And the crisis had been such a shock to our business that even though I was at the time 28 years of age, they didn't really have any hesitation in saying, right, Paul, you go run with it, really. So luck definitely plays a big part in everything, in everybody's life, I think. Being in the right place at the right time, and then having a little bit about you that allows you to shape those crises to your own advantage, to kind of see through them, to think about what's going to happen next and how you can maximize your advantage. And, going back to the liberal arts conversation, Andy, I like to think that those are the things that liberal arts students, that sort of forward thinking, being able to see your way through a little bit of chaos and realize that, life is going to achieve an equilibrium at some point, but it isn't going to be the one that was pre-crisis defined, and try and pick your way through that is I guess was something of an achievement. I don't want to over-egg that. I was only 28 and, a lot of it was luck.
Yeah, but you were there, and this is about the same time that Carl Schweitzer and I got together.
Right.
And again, not exactly the same story, but the confidence that you must have had, the belief in yourself to raise your hand and say, yeah, I can do this at 28 is quite extraordinary, and I do believe that the liberal arts, some form of broad-based knowledge training helps develop that confidence that. To be able to say, yeah, I'm going to raise my hand and step into the breach here.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think what liberal arts tend to do is to teach to keep your head up and to sort of scan the horizon a little bit. That nothing is ever quite what it seems. Everything is always changing. Human agency has a part to play. All of those things are sort of second nature to someone who's on that side of things. And that life doesn't work in a straight line. It's not mechanistic. And I guess if you have a different type of a mindset, I think chaos and disruption can sometimes affect you more deeply than someone who has a different sort of training and a different perspective on change, really.
Right. Well, we could get into a half-hour conversation on change, but
we certainly could.
Yeah. So, but let's get into the reskilling revolution. So, World Economic Forum, very large geopolitical organization, working with PwC, by the way, on the reskilling revolution. Right. PwC is like front and center in this. They estimate that up to 1 billion people need to be reskilled over the next decade, and not just upskilled, but reskilled. As you think back at your experience at CFA Institute, your time at Warland Court, and your previous experience, is this reskilling revolution, this need to focus on skills and reskilling 1 billion people, is that real or hype, or a combination of both?
Well, I think inevitably it's a combination of both. And
what a setup!
I guess guys like you and I, we remember the world before computers. When I went to work in 1980, there weren't any computers. The first desktop I saw, because I was outside of the US, so we were a few years behind, was 1984. Was the end of 1984. Was the first computer I saw. So I kind of think, isn't reskilling something that we're always doing? We're moving from pens to computers, computers to coding skills, perhaps, in terms of the way that, as the PC came in, coding was accessed. Then you go to artificial intelligence, and now we're in the middle of the sort of the digital blockchain revolution. Change is the only constant in life, as I always try and remind anybody who has worked for me. You can say that maybe the pace of change is speeding up, but then the pace of change again is always speeding up. That's, I always think about my grandfather, who was born in 1895 and died just after a man landed on the moon. And, you think he went from horse-drawn to space travel in his short lifetime, 70 odd years of his lifetime. So that's change. But it's constantly accelerating. It's constantly moving. You always have to learn new skills. You and I come from the same sort of background. The only thing that's a constant in life is that you've got to keep working at it, and you've got to keep acquiring new skills, because something is always changing. So yes, I'm sure PwC and the WEF are right that a lot of people do need to be retrained over the next decade. But then I would say that they always have had to have done.
Right. So based on your experiences, what are the most important future skills that our listeners should be thinking about acquiring to ensure that they remain relevant in the world of work? Now, you're here as a preeminent finance professional, but take that on irrespective of industry focus, just kind of across all industries.
Yeah, well, I think they obviously fall into the technical, which is to some extent industry specific, and the general. And I think the general are perhaps easier to talk about. The general skills are going to be things like adaptability and authenticity. I think those are two things that everybody has got to really master. Why authenticity? Because everything that you do is now subject to scrutiny and to analysis, and you have to be comfortable with that. And I don't think you can be comfortable with that unless you're authentic. Adaptability, because as we just finished saying, the world is changing at an ever faster pace. And in some surprising ways. I mean, the joke is that black swans now seem to be coming along every 5 or 6 years, and I do think that's that is something that when one looks back over the last 15 or 20 years, it's true that there are shocking events, whether at an economic or at a macro political level that are shaking things up. So I think adaptability, authenticity are absolutely key. Coming back down into the skills that I think everybody needs, computer coding skills. I find it amazing that we're still not teaching that at primary school. Blockchain, moving on from there, I think is going to be with us for a long time. And obviously digital skills, whether that's digital marketing, which I think is going to be or is already a game changer, but it would be in those areas that I think the curriculum of the future needs to be driving us much more towards the acquisition of those types of skills rather than some of the things that we've taught in school over the years.
Right. So now, if let's dial into the world of finance, which both of us grew up in, what's one skill that you would tell everyone in the field to invest time in developing?
I think you have to have 2 to 3 computer coding languages. So that would be
as a finance professional,
you've got very little chance of even getting into the profession at the pointy end unless you've got coding skills.
Wow. Well, you heard it here first, because that is not
first, because I think that's been the case for 5 or 6 years now.
Yeah.
But I remember being struck, Andy. I was at a careers event, as you and I so often have been at, with the HR head of UBS Investment Bank, and she said that in no uncertain terms, and that was 7-8 years ago now, that they didn't take on any new investment banking trainee unless they had computer coding skills.
So I was a leader back in my undergrad. My minor as an undergraduate was computer science.
Right.
So
you were ahead of your time.
I was way ahead of my time, but that, and I can attest that was extraordinarily valuable throughout my career. But if I think about the educational landscape today, and the 4,000-ish colleges and universities just in the United States, I may be completely wrong about this, but the average curriculum in finance at those institutions would not put the kind of emphasis on coding skills that you just described. So that was for my, hey, you've heard it here first. That's where that comment was pointed, because I'm confident that at my local university, our local universities here in La Crosse, that coding skills are not at the top of the list.
Well, I think also the great advantage of coding skills is that you can, and I know we're going to come on to this in our conversation, you can prove that you have them as well. It's a practical skill. It's a practical skill that you can demonstrate you possess. So I think that's the best of all worlds. It's it's something that employers want. You can acquire it, and you can demonstrate that you've got it.
Yeah. So we started the conversation talking about your transition from history into accountancy. That was from university into major corporation. The hypothesis that World Economic Forum and I also hold is that colleges and universities are just don't have the volume and the throughput to be retraining and reskilling 1 billion people globally over the next 8 to 10 years. So there have to become alternative pathways into the world of work. At least in the United States, degrees are far too expensive. You alluded to the elitist nature, if you will, of the existing pathways from colleges into the world of work, that people of disadvantaged backgrounds are not able to get into those rushing streams that exist. So is the world of finance, and then generally, but is the world of finance ready for alternative pathways into the world of work? Those skill portfolios. Here's what I know, and here's what I can do. Please hire me. But I don't have a degree.
Yeah. To a very limited extent, I would say. Unfortunately, I wish I could be more positive about that. I mean, the world of finance at the margin does take people who exhibit extraordinary abilities in certain areas that might pay dividends in, say, something like investment management. And the world of finance certainly talks a lot about alternative career pathways, but I don't think it does a huge amount about it. Going back to your point about students from disadvantaged backgrounds who don't go to Ivy League colleges or the group down from the Ivy League, most mainstream finance institutions still do the first screen on what degree have you done and what university have you been to, basically, in my experience. And that is, I agree with your hypothesis, by the way, but my experience is that finance is a very conservative profession. And that's kind of it struggles to adapt and to change. And I think, we see that in terms of, most of the people at the top of finance industries are white middle-class males. Basically, that's pretty much the same today as it's been over the last 30 or 40 years.
Yeah, and those white middle-class males, they scratch their heads and go, well, why isn't the field more diverse? How do we drive our diversity initiatives? And that's one of the biggest roadblocks that's standing in the way.
Yeah, and it's a huge problem. And obviously, we all recruit. We all have that human bias to recruit people who not just look like us, but have the same sort of background that we do. And so right. It's a really tough thing to break out of. And over the years, I've become a great believer in quotas. I know that's a very controversial thing to say, but deliberative policies where you just have to say that 20% of your graduate intake are going to come from certain backgrounds and from certain schools, and you're just going to do it. Because I think if you leave it to a sort of not to chance, but if you leave it to preference, if you like, we're never going to break out of the cycle that we're in at the moment. So over the years, I'm afraid I've come down to you affirmative action of one sort or another, because I see no appreciable change in the finance industry.
Yeah, so both you and I have accounting and finance backgrounds. I actually both taught accountancy and was a bookkeeper for a while, which was loads of fun. Tandy, Radio Shack Tandy computer was the first computer. This thing was as big as the desk that I'm sitting at right now. But anyway, let's get to the credentialing organizations that we've been involved in, and you are the CEO of CFA Institute. How do we get the AICPA and the CFA Institute and others to either alter the degree requirements? Because if we agree that there is a challenge in terms of diversity and inclusion and alternative pathways into the world of work, those credentialing bodies, CFP also requires a degree. How do we, I know I'm going a bit off script here, but how do we influence the future leaders of those organizations to chop their programs up into smaller segments that are more approachable to broader audiences, and alter those degree requirements so that we do get a more diverse population and those programs are more approachable?
Well, great question. I think it will be like most change in life, it'll be an internal process from those organizations, but also through external agency as well. And I think, I know CFA is, to go back to your point about chopping the program up, it's struggling with exactly that, because a lot of young people today are just saying, we're not going to sit down there and struggle away at level 1, 2, or 3 for whatever it happens to be, 6 months of study, 9,000 pages of curriculum, yada, yada, yada. We're just not going to do it. So
Right.
to remain relevant to the audience that they're trying to attract, which is mostly, as you know, university students, to remain relevant to that audience, they are having to consider chopping it up. The problem isn't necessarily just internal to the institute. The problem is also people who have the designation, people like you and I. We are so determined to jealously guard the credential that we fought so hard to attain, that we've kind of pulled the drawbridge up behind us all the time. And I think what do we need to do? It's a hearts and minds campaign, not just within the Institute, because actually I think you'll find that the Institute is relatively psychologically ready for what you're saying. It's more the people who hold the credentials, and then behind that, the employers who are employing people who have these designations expect that someone has come through a system that they understand. And
Right.
so, it's a multi-piece challenge, I think, to get it done. But without starting down that process, we're never going to make the change. And I think the biggest change is going to come from students themselves, who are just saying, it's got to be online. Obviously, it's got to be modular. Those modules can be acquired over many years. You can't just tell me I've got to do all of this within a certain space of time. I need, going back to your old business, I need much more help with the training side of things and the learning support techniques. I want a community of people around me that I can learn with. All of these things are happening and happening fast, I think, in the credentialing world. And I hope that they will lead to the thought that you have raised, that ultimately, all of those things can have a much broader appeal than just people who have got a university education.
Yeah.
And I think finally, I'd say, Andy, that the other thing that needs to happen is that those credentials also have to have a much harder practical edge than they do at the moment.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the final piece in this conversation, that CFA stands accused, and I think to a certain extent rightly accused, of being too theoretical, perhaps, not enough practical skills attributed to it. No financial modeling, for instance, and that's a key skill that people need. No computer coding, all of these things, and obviously it's impossible for one designation to cover the whole waterfront. But I think for a credential to genuinely become the sort of credential that you're talking about as a university replacement, it has to be thought about less as an academic discipline and more as a practical discipline. And I think that's perhaps the biggest piece of rethinking that organizations like CFP, CFA perhaps need to go through.
Yeah, so I just like to put in a plug. There will be charter holders that listen to this show, and just put in a plug for folks like Paul and I, who have been there, done that, and may feel protective of the pain and the struggle that we went through, and we want future employees and charter holders to go through the same kind of hell that we went through. But let's change that conversation, and let's be leaders in that conversation that change is coming. The future isn't going to look exactly like the past. We do have in the field of finance a very large challenge with accessibility, especially from individuals from more challenging backgrounds. It is far too white, far too male, and the only way that we make change is to make changes to the status quo. So,
I think that's absolutely right. It's well said, and I think as you know, charter holders feel that it's getting the charter is as much about a test of character as it is about a test of practical ability or even theoretical ability. And so, and that's true to an extent, and that's a valuable part of anyone who has got the charter. But what we have to say is that the primary goal of getting the charter is to show that you can actually look after other people's money successfully. And that's a practical task. Let's test those other elements of it, your resilience, your capacity for hard work. All of those things can be tested in a different fashion. Your ability to work under pressure and all of those things can be tested elsewhere. The primary goal of the charter is to deliver job-ready investment professionals, and I think that's the connecting thought, really, with your comments, Andy.
Yes, experiential is the future. So we're coming up on our show time here. I've got one more question for you. There'll be finance and investments professionals listening to this, and prospective finance professionals. What's one piece of advice that you haven't already given to someone who's just entering the field to help them find their accelerant and their rocket boosters?
I hate that question because it's a difficult one to answer. But the way I always try to do it is to say to people that it's not where you start that counts; it's where you finish. And life is an increasingly long race, God willing. That you'll be in the world of work. I know most of us want to be on the beach by the time we're 30, sipping Mai Tais and having a good time. But the reality is, you go to work, as I did at the age of 20, and at the age of 62, I'm still swinging the bat. So it's a long career, and I'm looking forward to another 10 to 15 years plying it. So there's no rush. Take your time. Remember that over the next 50 years, the world of work is going to change dramatically. You'll be telling the stories that I'm telling now. That I came in before computers, and now we live in blockchain and artificial intelligence and all of those things. I cannot imagine what the world of work is going to look like in 50 years' time. I do know it's going to be hugely different to today. So remember, you've got to get going. So start somewhere. But if you work hard and you keep yourself open to new learnings at every stage of your career, you'll finish in a place that you wouldn't have believed you were capable of. And I think that's the most important lesson and piece of advice that I always give young people is don't get ahead of your skis. Remember that it's an awfully long race, and start as a junior, learn your craft, work your way up, keep learning, and you'll be fine.
Awesome advice. Well, Paul, thank you so much for joining us today. My usual outro, I'm Andy Temte. This is the Balancing Act podcast. You can find all things on andrewtemte.com. You can find the podcast on your favorite podcasting services. We've got the Saturday Morning Muse. I've got the book Balancing Act. And Paul, thank you again so much for being here. Have a great day.
Great pleasure, Andy.